the book of John, chapter 20, verse 1. It reads like this. Early in the morning on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. And she ran at once to Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one Jesus loved. And out of breath she said, "They took the master from the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." Peter and the other disciple ran immediately to the tomb. They ran neck and neck as though they were in a race. And the other disciple got to the tomb first. He outran Peter, and he stopped to look in. And he saw pieces of the linen cloth lying there, but he didn't go in. But Simon Peter, when he got there, he did go in. He entered the tomb. He observed the linen clothes lying there, and the kerchief that was used to cover the head of Christ, not lying with the linen clothes, but it was separate, neatly folded all by itself. Then the other disciple, the one who had gotten there first, went into the tomb, took one look at the evidence, and he believed. What was the evidence that morning that convicted Peter and John that Jesus was alive? I think to answer that question, we have to go back 48 hours in their life and to see what they had been through that led up to this moment. What was the evidence? Well, if you think for a moment, what was the evidence in your life? What was the evidence in your life that you first believed? Think about that as we read this. They had been with him at the Last Supper, and he spoke of the one who would betray him. And it struck fear in their hearts. And they each asked themselves, is it I? Am I the one? After being with him for 3 years, after saying the many times that they loved him, they still questioned themselves. And I think today that we all still need to question ourselves. We all need to hold ourselves accountable. Do we really love him? They had been with him in the garden as he prayed in agony. They were with him when Judas betrayed him, and they realized the words that he had said. They even tried to defend him, but there was no defending him against the Roman legion. They followed Jesus at a distance. They followed Jesus at a distance. We have to ask ourselves this morning, are we following Jesus at a distance? Or are we just as close to him as we could possibly be? They were hiding in the shadows outside the gates. And he was put through the mockery of 6 trials between night and morning. And they heard with everyone else the outright lies that were brought against him. And their hearts sank. And they heard the same verdict again and again. From each trial, he was guilty. They had seen him scourged until he could no longer stand under his own power. They'd seen the crown of thorns that was pressed into his head. They'd seen him slapped and punched until he was barely recognizable as a man. And they had hope beyond all hope that when Jesus was taken before the crowds, that finally this nightmare would be over. Surely the thousands of people that he had taught that had seen him heal people, they would stand up and convince the Romans to turn him loose, that he was harmless. But with more growing fear, they watched as the mob, under the influence of the Sanhedrin, take a convicted murderer and turn him loose and cry out, "Crucify Christ." They had watched the angry mob, scared for their lives, as Jesus was nailed to the cross and hoisted into the air, hanging humiliated before all men. They had watched his labored breathing and his groans, and they heard his last cry. When he said, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they do. And it is finished. But when they heard it is finished, what they were hearing was that they were finished. I am finished. Because all their hopes and dreams they had put in him, they thought were dying with him that day. Everything they believed about him was being questioned. Everything that they had hoped for, they thought hung on that tree. Because they don't know what you and I know today. They were there. They were weeping in possession. They carried Jesus to the barred tomb. They were there when the huge stone was rolled into place, sealing him up. And then they had to take that long, long walk home. Meaning that their life as they once knew it was over. All their dreams was buried in that tomb. And we can make fun of them, we can bash them, and we can belittle them. Not hanging around to see what was fixing to take place or wait for the miracle. But how many times have we felt like they had? How many times we put our hopes and our vision and our dreams out there, and they didn't come about the way we thought? We were like them. We distanced ourselves from the one that saved us. But I'm so glad to tell you today that the story didn't end there. The story didn't end on Friday. And I believe today that if they had known what we know today, that resurrection was coming on Sunday, their story would have been much different. Jesus was arrested in the garden. Yes, he was, where he was praying. But it's Friday, and the resurrection's coming. On Friday, they were hiding, and Peter denied him. But that was Friday. Resurrection's coming on Sunday. On Friday, Jesus was standing before the high priest of Israel, silent as the lamb before slaughter. But it was Friday. On Sunday, he was going to be resurrected as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. On Friday, the Roman soldiers were flogging him, and they were tearing at his flesh, and he was agonizing pain. But on Sunday, he arose with a resurrected body. On Friday, the Son of Man stood before as they pressed the crown of thorns into his head. But it was Friday, and resurrection was coming. On Friday, we saw him walking to Calvary, blood dripping from his body. We saw the cross crashing down on his back. We saw him stumble under the load. But today is Sunday, and we know him as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. There's no more stumbling. On Friday, Jesus was hanging on the cross, and he was bloody and dying. But today, he's a risen King because it's Sunday. On Friday, the sky grew dark. The earth began to tremble. And he who knew no sin took all the sins of the world upon himself. And the Lamb cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? But that was on Friday. Sunday was coming. On Friday, at the moment of Jesus' death, the veil of the temple was torn in two. The veil that separated sinful man from the holy God was torn from top to bottom, giving us access today because of his resurrection on Sunday. On Friday, Jesus is hanging on the cross. Heaven is weeping. Hell is throwing a party. That was because it was Friday, and they didn't know what we know today. They didn't know it was coming. But the resurrection was coming Sunday. And on that day, 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, the only begotten Son of God, the only perfect man, died on the cross of Calvary for me and for you. Satan thought he had won the victory. Surely he had finally defeated the Son of God. But he didn't know that Sunday was coming. And on Sunday, just about dawn of the first day of the week, there was a great earthquake. But that wasn't the only thing that was shaken, but because now it was Sunday, and the angel of the Lord was coming down from heaven to roll the stone away from the floor of the tomb. Yes, it's Sunday. And the Lamb of God that was silent before the slaughter is now our resurrected King, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Is he your King today? When he sat with his disciples at the Last Supper, he told them everything that was about to take place. But they didn't understand. They thought he was going to rule and reign as a king of Rome, and they were going to take positions with him to rule over the people. They had no idea the power that was coming with his resurrection. The power that he was going to pour out on his people to live a pure and holy life. The power he was going to pour out to heal and set his people free. And he sat at the table with them. And he said, one of you is going to betray me. Every time I read about that, I think about the number of times in my life before I was sold out, before I gave my life to him, how many times I was just like Judas. I'd have sold anything to get another bottle of whiskey. I'd have done anything to get what I wanted. I would have cheated anybody if it suited my benefit. But see, he came into my life just like he came into your life, the resurrected King. He came into your life and he washed those things away. He came into your life and resurrected the dry, dead things and made them live. Sitting before us today, each of us, is like the great and mighty army of Ezekiel. At one time we were dry, dead bones. We had no life. Then he breathed life into us. And we stood up a great and mighty army. That army today are called sons and daughters of the King. That army today sits before us, sits next to us, because Jesus lives in us. That night he took the bread and he broke it. He said, this is my broken body, which is broken for you. Each time you do this in remembrance of me. And likewise, after supper, he took the cup and he said, this is the cup of my new covenant. A covenant that he wrote with his own blood. A promise that he made, a contract that he set before us. He said, I will do my part if you do yours. I made you this promise of life eternal. I made you promise that I'll heal you and set you free. I make you this promise to love you and never leave you nor forsake you. Have you bought into the promise today? Can I have those that are going to serve come and take the cup and the plate? Miss Carol, can you put on some background music or something while they're serving?